Captain Minu stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the stars blur past the viewport. His ship carried 53 souls across the empty void between systems. They were diplomats, translators, and crew members heading to another peaceful meeting with alien species who barely remembered human names. 15 years. That was how long humanity had been part of the Galactic Council. 15 years of being the new species, the young ones, the people nobody took seriously. The other races had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. They had seen empires rise and fall. To them, humans were children playing at galactic politics. Minu didn't mind. He had joined the diplomatic corps because he believed in peace. Earth had seen enough war in its history. Humanity finally had a chance to be something better among the stars. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," Lieutenant said from her station. She was young, brilliant with navigation systems, and one of the best officers Minu had ever worked with. "It's not on any standard frequency." "Put it through," Minu ordered. Static filled the bridge, then a voice spoke in broken but understandable human language. "Human vessel, you are in space. Turn back or be destroyed." Minu frowned. He checked his navigation charts. They were in neutral space, nowhere near territory. The hegemony controlled 12 systems and had a reputation for aggression, but they had never challenged human ships before. "This is Captain Minu of the Earth vessel Horizon's Edge. We are in neutral space traveling to council negotiations. We mean no harm and request safe passage." The response came quickly. "There is no neutral space. All space belongs to the strong. You are weak. Turn back." Ambassador entered the bridge, his diplomatic robes wrinkled from sleep. He was an older man, gray-haired and patient, who had spent decades building relationships with alien species. "What's happening?" "Are claiming we're in their territory," Minu explained. "But we're not. We're exactly where we're supposed to be." "Move to the communication panel. Let me talk to them. This must be a misunderstanding." Before he could speak, the ship rocked violently. Alarms screamed across the bridge. Red lights flashed on every console. "We're under attack," shouted. "Multiple weapons impacts. Shields are failing." Minu gripped his chair as another blast shook the vessel. "Return fire. Get us out of here." "Weapons are offline," another officer reported. "Main engines are damaged. We can't jump to faster-than-light speed." The Horizon's Edge was a diplomatic ship, not a warship. It had basic shields and minimal weapons, designed for protection against pirates and accidents, not military assault. Against a battle fleet, it was defenseless. "Launch all escape pods," Minu ordered. "Get everyone off this ship now." Crew members ran through corridors as the ship tore apart around them. Escape pods began launching into space, small capsules carrying 2 or 3 people each. Minu stayed on the bridge, making sure everyone else got out first. "Captain, you need to go," said, pulling at his arm. Another explosion ripped through the ship. The viewport cracked. Air began hissing out through holes in the hull. "Go," Minu pushed her toward the escape pod. "That's an order." Ran, and 3 other crew members followed her into the pod. Minu was right behind them when a bulkhead collapsed. Metal and debris blocked his path. The pod door closed automatically. Through the small window, he saw his face, tears streaming down her cheeks as the pod launched. Minu turned and ran for the backup pod on the other side of the bridge. The ship was dying around him. He could feel it in the way the floor tilted, the way systems sparked and failed. He reached the pod and threw himself inside just as the main reactor exploded. The blast launched his pod into space like a bullet. Through the tiny viewport, Minu watched the Horizon's Edge break into pieces. Flames died instantly in the vacuum. Debris spread in all directions. His home for 3 years gone in seconds. Then he saw the ships, massive vessels covered in weapons and armor. They moved through the debris field, collecting the escape pods with tractor beams. Minu's pod shook as a beam locked onto it. He was pulled toward the nearest ship. Around him, other pods were also being captured. He counted 23. Some pods had been destroyed in the explosion. Some had escaped, but 23 were being taken aboard enemy vessels. The inside of the ship was dark and cold. Minyu and other survivors were dragged from their pods by tall, armored aliens. They looked like a cross between reptiles and insects, with hard shells and multiple eyes. They moved with mechanical precision, showing no emotion. The humans were pushed into a large chamber. Minyu found and in the crowd. Other faces he recognized, crew members he had shared meals with, worked alongside, called friends. All looked terrified. A commander entered the chamber. He was larger than the others, his armor decorated with symbols of rank and achievement. When he spoke, his voice was translated by devices the prisoners wore. "I am commander of the hegemony. You are prisoners of war. Your species has entered space it does not belong in. This is the consequence. Stepped forward. This is a mistake. We are diplomats traveling to." Struck him across the face. The old man fell to the floor. Blood ran from his nose. "Silence, vermin. Your species was granted council membership as a courtesy. You were supposed to stay in your small corner of space and be grateful. Instead, you spread like disease. You build colonies. You explore systems. You act as if you belong among the elder races." "We have every right," Minyu began. "You have no rights," interrupted. "The strong take what they wish, the weak suffer. This is the truth of the universe. Your people have forgotten their place. We will remind them." The chamber's walls became transparent. Minyu realized they were screens. Cameras pointed at the prisoners. "Your deaths will be broadcast across the galaxy," said. "Every species will see what happens to those who challenge authority. Your Galactic Council will watch and do nothing, because they are cowards who hide behind words and laws." Soldiers grabbed a human engineer named. He struggled, but the aliens were too strong. They dragged him to the center of the chamber. "No," screamed. Others shouted, but guards held them back. Drew a weapon. It hummed with energy. "This is the price of weakness." The weapon fired. His body fell to the floor. The chamber fell silent except for the sound of crying. 22 more to go," said calmly. "The galaxy is watching, humans. Let them see your species die." One by one, they killed the prisoners. Minyu watched friends and crew members murdered in front of cameras broadcasting to millions of aliens across known space. He watched, the peaceful diplomat who had dedicated his life to understanding other species, shot down like an animal. He watched, brilliant and young with her whole life ahead of her, fall beside the others. When Minyu's turn came, he didn't beg or cry. He looked directly into the camera and spoke clearly. "Remember this day, remember what they did to us, and remember what comes next." Laughed, "Nothing comes next for your kind. Your species will learn to submit or be destroyed." The weapon rose. Minyu closed his eyes and thought of Earth. The weapon fired. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the broadcast. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss the incident. Most expected stern words and economic sanctions against the. Some suggested stronger diplomatic pressure. Then the human representative stood. Her name was, and she had been quiet during her short time on the council. Now her voice was clear and cold. "The hegemony has committed an act of war against humanity. They have murdered our diplomats and broadcast their deaths as entertainment. As of this moment, a state of total war exists between Earth and the hegemony. We will accept nothing less than their complete and unconditional surrender." The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. No species had declared total war in over 300 years. It was considered barbaric, outdated, a relic of primitive thinking. The elder species smiled at each other. The humans were young and emotional. They would learn that war in the modern galaxy was a complicated matter of limited engagements and political maneuvering. That would crush them in a few months, and the humans would accept their place. None of them understood what was about to happen. None of them realized that humanity had just stopped pretending to be civilized. The hegemony prepared for war the way they always had. They moved their fleets to the borders of human space. They fortified their defensive positions. They prepared for traditional battle, ship against ship, following the rules of engagement that had governed galactic warfare for centuries. They expected humanity to respond conventionally: small skirmishes at the borders, diplomatic protests, perhaps a few minor retaliatory strikes. Then negotiations would begin, mediated by the Galactic Council, and everything would return to normal. The humans would learn their lesson and submit to dominance. Instead, something strange happened. All human communication networks went silent. Every broadcast, every transmission, every signal from human space simply stopped. Trade ships that had been moving between systems returned to human ports and didn't come out. Human diplomats at the Galactic Council said nothing and attended no meetings. It was as if humanity had vanished. They found this amusing. Clearly, the humans were paralyzed with fear. Commander, celebrated as a hero among his people for his decisive action, gave speeches about human cowardice. The galaxy watched and waited for humanity's inevitable surrender. But on Earth, and in every human colony across space, something very different was happening. Admiral stood in the command center deep beneath Earth's surface. Hundreds of officers worked at stations around her, coordinating the largest mobilization in human history. She was a veteran of the colonial defense forces, a woman who had spent 30 years preparing for a war she hoped would never come. Now that war was here, and she would make sure humanity won it. "Status report," she said calmly. Colonel stepped forward. He commanded the Special Operations Forces, units trained in tactics that other species considered too ruthless for modern warfare. All industrial centers have completed conversion to military production. Civilian factories are now producing weapons, armor, and ammunition. Shipyards across 15 systems are working at maximum capacity. "How many ships?" asked. "We're completing 30 new warships every week. Within 6 months, we'll have a fleet larger than anything the galaxy has seen in 1,000 years." A junior officer looked shocked. "How is that possible?" the projections said. "The projections assumed peacetime production levels," interrupted. "We're not at peace anymore. Every human being is contributing to the war effort. We've activated manufacturing capacity that was dormant. We've reopened mines that were considered unprofitable. We've converted passenger ships into troop transports. When humanity decides to fight, we don't do anything halfway." Doctor entered the command center, carrying data tablets and looking exhausted. She was a who had spent her career studying alien species, trying to understand them and build bridges between cultures. Now, she used that knowledge to find weaknesses and plan attacks. "I've completed the analysis of military doctrine," she said. "They fight like most galactic species. They have rules. They try to disable enemy ships rather than destroy them. They avoid civilian casualties. They believe in proportional responses." "And we don't," said flatly. "No, we don't. Our military history is based on total war. When threatened, humans don't seek to win battles. We seek to eliminate threats completely and permanently." Pulled up images of ships and stations. "They'll expect us to fight like them. They'll be wrong." Nodded. "Activate Protocol Reaper." Officers around the room glanced at each other nervously. Protocol Reaper was a military doctrine developed during Earth's bloodiest wars. It had never been used in space. It was designed for one purpose: the complete destruction of enemy capability to wage war. "Admiral," an officer said quietly, "Protocol Reaper doesn't include provisions for prisoners or surrender until the enemy is completely defeated. The Galactic Council will consider it. The Galactic Council watched our people die and debated sanctions, said coldly. I don't care what they consider acceptable. The wanted war. We're going to give them exactly what they asked for. Across human space, the transformation continued. On Mars, weapons factories that had been built but never activated came online. In the asteroid belt, mining operations accelerated to unprecedented levels, stripping resources to feed the war machine. On Europa, scientists worked around the clock developing new weapons and defensive systems. The human population, numbering in the billions, united behind a single purpose. There were no protests, no calls for peace, no dissenting voices. They had made a fatal mistake when they broadcast the executions. Every human who saw that broadcast understood that this wasn't a political conflict or a territorial dispute. This was survival. Doctor requested time to address the Galactic Council. She was granted permission, and representatives from hundreds of species gathered to hear what humanity had to say. She stood at the speaking platform, looking small and tired, and began to talk. Most of you don't understand humans. You see us as newcomers, young and inexperienced. You think we're like other species who evolved on gentle worlds and learned cooperation before conflict. You're wrong. Images appeared on screens throughout the chamber. Earth from space, beautiful and blue, then images of Earth's surface. Jungles where everything was poisonous. Oceans filled with predators. Deserts that would kill in hours. Ice fields that crushed and froze. Storms that destroyed entire regions. Earth tried to kill us every single day for millions of years, continued. Everything on our planet evolved to survive in an environment where death was constant. We didn't become the dominant species because we were strongest or fastest. We became dominant because we never gave up. More images appeared. Ancient humans hunting prey for days, following footprints across vast distances. Tribes warring against each other with stone tools and determination. Civilizations rising and falling in cycles of violence. We're persistence predators, explained. When we hunt, we don't chase our prey until it gets away. We chase it until it collapses from exhaustion. We followed prey animals for days until they died from running. We developed the ability to keep going when every instinct screams at us to stop. The alien representatives shifted uncomfortably. Some species understood where this was going. Others still didn't see the connection. You've watched our entertainment, said. Our movies and books and games. You thought they were fantasies, exaggerations. Stories about humans fighting impossible odds and refusing to surrender. Stories about last stands and Pyrrhic victories. Stories where humans destroy themselves rather than submit to conquest. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Those aren't fantasies. That's our history. We've done all of those things to each other for thousands of years. We've fought wars that killed millions. We've developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We've written detailed doctrines on how to wage total war, how to break enemy populations, how to ensure victory by making the cost of fighting us greater than any possible gain. The council chamber was completely silent now. They attacked our diplomats. They thought they were declaring war on a weak species that would beg for peace. They were wrong. They didn't declare war on a government or an army. They declared war on every human being alive, on the descendants of persistence predators who survived on a death world by being more relentless than anything that hunted us. His voice hardened. Your civilizations developed warfare as a political tool, a way to settle disputes with limited violence. You have rules and conventions because war is supposed to be temporary, a means to an end. For humans, war isn't political, it's existential. When we fight to win completely. We don't seek advantageous peace terms. We seek the total elimination of the threat. She pulled up new images. Massive shipyards working day and night. Weapons production facilities covering entire moons. Millions of humans volunteering for military service. You're about to see what happens when humanity stops pretending to be like you, when we stop following your rules and start following ours. The wanted to make an example of us. We're going to make them an example instead. An example of what happens when you attack the most deadly species in the galaxy. Left the platform. Behind her, alien representatives began arguing frantically. Some demanded immediate intervention. Others insisted that humanity be expelled from the council. A few, the older and wiser species, said nothing. They recognized the truth in her words. They had studied human history. They knew what was coming. Back on Earth, Admiral received a report from her intelligence officers. The fleet was positioned exactly where they expected, guarding the borders, waiting for a conventional attack. She smiled without humor. How long until the strike fleet is ready? 72 hours, Colonel reported. Good, we'll hit them where they're not looking. Remind our commanders, no warnings, no surrender offers. We attack, we destroy, and we move to the next target. They wanted to show the galaxy how to wage war. Let's educate them. In the shipyards orbiting Earth, the first wave of warships completed final preparations. These weren't the peaceful exploration vessels humanity had shown the galaxy. These were weapons designed by a species that understood violence on a fundamental level. Each ship carried enough firepower to level cities. Each crew had been trained in tactics that other species considered unnecessarily brutal. Each captain understood their mission, make the regret the day they heard the word human. The silence from human space continued. They laughed and prepared for easy victory. The Galactic Council debated and argued and accomplished nothing. And humanity finished preparing for war. The transformation was complete. The peaceful newcomers were gone. In their place stood something the galaxy hadn't seen in eons, a species with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. They had congratulated themselves for declaring war on what they thought was weak prey. They were about to learn that humanity wasn't prey at all. Humanity was the predator. Captain stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching her crew make final preparations. Her ship was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Sleek and deadly, covered in weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. It was one of 50 experimental warships built specifically for this war. Around her in space floated 200 more vessels, cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and support ships. The largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, and it was just the first wave. More ships were coming online every day. All ships report ready, Lieutenant said from his station. He was young but brilliant, a specialist in cyber warfare and tactical systems. Target coordinates locked in. Took a deep breath. In 30 seconds, they would jump across hundreds of light years and strike deep into territory. Not at the border where the enemy expected them, but at the heart of their industrial complex. All ships, this is Captain, our mission is simple. We destroy everything military. Shipyards, weapons platforms, supply depots, fleet bases. Show no mercy. Take no prisoners. The wanted war, we're bringing it to their doorstep. She paused, thinking of the crew of the Horizon's Edge. Thinking of Minu and all the others who died while the galaxy watched. Make them pay. All ships jump in 3, 2, 1, execute. Space twisted. Reality bent. The human fleet vanished from their staging area and reappeared in orbit around an industrial world. Automated defenses immediately activated, but they were too slow. The human attack had already begun. The Retribution targeted a massive orbital shipyard. Instead of the plasma weapons most species used, it fired quantum destabilization torpedoes. The weapons phased through the shipyard's shields as if they didn't exist and detonated inside the structure. The entire facility, 3 kilometers long and home to thousands of workers, simply disintegrated. Felt nothing as she watched it die. They had broadcast executions. They had wanted to teach humanity about fear. Now humanity was teaching them about consequences. Around the planet, Human ships attacked with coordinated precision. Weapons platforms exploded. Defense satellites became expanding clouds of debris. Warships tried to respond, but were overwhelmed by the speed and ferocity of the assault. Human ships moved differently than other vessels. They made micro-jumps during combat, appearing behind enemy positions, firing and vanishing before return fire could hit them. It was disorienting and terrifying to fight against. Lieutenant worked at his station, his fingers flying across controls. Breaking into their communications network now. They're calling for help, but we're jamming all long-range transmissions. Nobody's coming to save them. How long until reinforcements could arrive? Asked. Minimum 6 hours. We'll be done and gone in 2. The battle, if it could be called that, continued. They had expected traditional warfare, ship-to-ship engagements where both sides maneuvered for advantage, honorable combat with opportunities to retreat or surrender. They got none of that. Human tactics were based on overwhelming force and complete destruction. When a human ship targeted an enemy vessel, it didn't try to disable it. It obliterated it. No warning shots, no demands for surrender, just efficient, brutal violence. On the planet's surface, Lieutenant led a marine assault on a military command center. His team of 40 soldiers wore powered armor that made each of them a walking tank. They moved through defenses like a blade through paper. Soldiers tried to stop them. These were trained warriors from a species that had conquered a dozen worlds. They were experienced, well-equipped, and fighting on their home territory. It didn't matter. Marines fought with a combination of tactical precision and raw aggression that shocked the defenders. When wounded, they didn't fall back. They kept fighting. When outnumbered, they didn't retreat. They pushed forward. Human soldiers had been taught that the only way to guarantee survival was to make the enemy too dead to threaten you. They had rules about honor in combat. They believed in glorious battle and worthy opponents. The humans didn't care about honor. They cared about winning. Placed demolition charges throughout the command center while his team held off counterattacks. When the building exploded, it took out the planetary defense coordination systems. The remaining forces lost all organized command structure. Command center destroyed, reported over the communication network, moving to secondary objectives. From orbit, watched the progress reports come in. 27 human strike forces had attacked 27 different targets simultaneously across space. Every attack was succeeding. Every target was being destroyed. The Galactic Council transmitted emergency messages demanding humanity stop the assault immediately, deleted them without reading. The Council had watched human diplomats die and done nothing. Their opinions no longer mattered. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the planetary governor, said. They want to negotiate. Tell them we don't negotiate during battle, replied coldly. They can surrender unconditionally or die fighting. Those are the only options. The governor chose to surrender. His forces stopped fighting. Marines secured key facilities and took control of the planetary government centers. Within 2 hours, the industrial world was under human control. Every military asset was destroyed. Every warship was debris. Every weapon facility was rubble. And this was happening in 27 locations simultaneously. The news spread across space like wildfire. Humans weren't fighting a war of conquest or territory. They were systematically destroying military capability. They were showing that the cost of attacking humanity was the total annihilation of everything you valued. Commander, the hero who had executed human diplomats, received reports of the attacks with growing horror. This wasn't how wars were supposed to work. Where were the negotiations? Where were the limited engagements and political maneuvering? His subordinates reported impossible numbers. 30 warships destroyed here. A shipyard obliterated there. An entire fleet base reduced to wreckage. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, striking without warning and vanishing before reinforcements arrived. "How are they moving so fast?" demanded. "Their faster-than-light technology shouldn't allow for tactical jumps." His science officer looked pale. "They've modified their drive system somehow. Our intelligence said it was impossible, but they're doing it anyway. They can jump short distances during combat. It makes them almost impossible to target." Watched footage from the battle zones. Human ships moving like predators. Human marines fighting with an intensity that seemed insane. Human commanders showing no hesitation, no doubt, no mercy. "Send messages to the Galactic Council," he ordered. "Tell them humanity is committing war crimes. Tell them to intervene." The Council reviewed the evidence. Technically, humanity wasn't violating any laws. They weren't attacking civilians. They weren't using banned weapons. They were simply fighting with a level of aggression that no one had thought possible in modern warfare. Some species privately supported the human approach. They had been bullies for centuries, taking what they wanted and crushing anyone who objected. Seeing them on the receiving end of overwhelming force satisfied a dark desire for justice. Other species were horrified. This wasn't civilized warfare. This was barely controlled savagery. But everyone understood one thing: humanity was winning. Captain's fleet returned to human space after completing their mission. Not a single ship was lost. They had destroyed military assets worth trillions of credits and crippled defensive capabilities across 6 systems. And this was just the beginning. Admiral reviewed the battle reports with satisfaction. "Casualties." "Minimal," Colonel reported. 43 wounded, 8 killed. The lost approximately 30,000 military personnel and 300 ships. "Good, prepare the second wave. Target their supply lines and logistics centers. I want their ability to wage war completely destroyed within 3 months. The Galactic Council is demanding we accept peace negotiations," an aide mentioned. His expression hardened. "Tell the Council that humanity will accept negotiations when the hegemony no longer exists as a military power. Until then, we will continue operations." Across human space, citizens watched broadcasts of the battles. They saw military installations burning. They saw enemy ships destroyed. They saw the faces of human soldiers, grim and determined, carrying out their missions. And they remembered why this war started. They remembered the executions broadcast across the galaxy. They remembered the commander laughing as he murdered defenseless prisoners. Public support for the war was absolute. Humans understood that this wasn't about territory or politics. This was about sending a message that would echo across the galaxy for centuries: never attack humanity. In the capital, emergency meetings were held. Military leaders who had been confident of easy victory now scrambled to develop defensive strategies. But how did you defend against an enemy who could appear anywhere without warning? How did you fight soldiers who seemed to feel no fear? "We need to appeal to their sense of honor," one general suggested. "Challenge them to meet us in open battle." An intelligence officer shook his head. "Humans don't care about honor the way we do. They care about winning. They'll hit us where we're weak, avoid our strengths, and grind us down until we can't fight anymore." Then what do we do? Nobody had an answer. 3 weeks into the war, the hegemony had lost 6 of its 12 systems, not to occupation or conquest, but to the systematic destruction of everything that made them a military power. Their fleets were shattered. Their shipyards were gone. Their economy was collapsing under the strain of trying to rebuild while under constant attack. And humanity showed no signs of slowing down. Captain prepared for her next mission, loading weapons and planning attack routes. Lieutenant analyzed communication networks, finding new targets. Lieutenant trained his Marines for the next assault. They were all tired. War was exhausting even when winning, but none of them considered stopping. They had wanted to make an example of humanity. They wanted to show the galaxy what happened to weak species who didn't know their place. Humanity was showing them something different. They were demonstrating what happened when you attacked a species that had evolved through millions of years of fighting for survival on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. They were learning that humans didn't fight wars the way civilized species did. Humans fought wars the way apex predators hunted prey. And the hunt had only just begun. The war entered its fourth month. Commander Bora worked in the intelligence center, surrounded by screens showing real-time data from across space. She coordinated reconnaissance missions, analyzed enemy movements, and planned the next wave of attacks. Her team never slept. There was too much work to do. Latest report from deep space probes, an analyst said, pulling up star maps. The hegemony is down to 6 functional systems. The other 6 are under human control or so heavily damaged they can't support military operations. Bora studied the maps. Red markers showed destroyed facilities. Yellow markers indicated ongoing operations. Green markers were secure human positions. The hegemony was bleeding from 1,000 wounds. Any signs of surrender? They're sending diplomatic envoys to the Galactic Council, requesting mediation and peace negotiations. Bora pulled up the communication logs, messages begging for help, claiming humanity was committing atrocities, pleading for someone to stop the war. She felt no pity. They had broadcast executions and laughed while doing it. Now they wanted mercy. What's Admiral's response? She said no. The word echoed through the intelligence center. Officers glanced at each other, surprised but not shocked. Everyone knew where this was going. Bora opened a secure channel to Earth Command. Admiral appeared on the screen, looking as tired as everyone else but absolutely determined. Admiral, they want to negotiate, Bora reported. They're offering territorial concessions and reparations. Tell them we're not interested in territory or money, said flatly. We want their complete surrender. Their government will be dissolved. Their military will be disbanded. Their leaders will face trial for war crimes. The species will be placed under human oversight for a minimum of 50 years. Bora took a deep breath. The Galactic Council won't support those terms. They're already calling it conquest. I don't care what they call it. The wanted war. They got war. Now they're going to learn what happens when you lose a war against humanity. The communication ended. Bora turned to her team and gave the orders. No negotiations. No compromise. The war would continue until the hegemony ceased to exist as a functioning state. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council held emergency sessions. Representatives argued passionately about humanity's actions. Some species demanded immediate intervention to stop what they called human aggression. Others pointed out that they had started the conflict and were simply facing the consequences. The human representative listened to hours of debate before finally standing to speak. You call this aggression. You say we've gone too far. You watched the execute 53 human beings and did nothing except debate sanctions. Now, you want us to stop defending ourselves and accept terms that would leave the capable of attacking us again in the future. She paused, looking around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces. Let me be very clear. Humanity will not stop. The government will be dismantled. Their military will be dissolved. Their leaders will face justice. This isn't negotiable. This is what happens when you murder our people and think there will be no consequences. An elder representative from a peaceful species stood. But surely you understand that total war is barbaric. Civilized species find diplomatic solutions. His expression hardened. You call yourselves civilized because you've forgotten what it means to truly fight for survival. You've spent thousands of years in relative peace, negotiating and compromising, because no one has threatened your existence. The threatened ours. They made it very clear that they wanted us erased from the galaxy. We're simply granting their wish in reverse. Another representative objected. You're setting a dangerous precedent. If every conflict escalates to total war, then species will think twice before murdering diplomats, interrupted. They wanted to make an example of humanity. They succeeded. We're now an example of what happens when you attack a species willing to fight to the last person standing. The council erupted in arguments, sat down and ignored them all. Humanity's position was clear. Either the galaxy accepted it or they could try to stop it themselves. Nobody was willing to risk facing human military forces. Meanwhile, Commander Bora received intelligence that changed everything. Her deep-cover agents had been investigating activities in the months before the war. What they found made her feel sick. The massacre of the Horizon's Edge wasn't an isolated incident. They had been raiding human colonies for 6 months, testing defenses, studying human responses, and occasionally abducting civilians. They had been planning a larger invasion. The execution of the diplomats was supposed to be the opening move, designed to terrify humanity into submission. They weren't just aggressive, Bora said to her team. They were planning genocide. The attacks on our colonies, the murdered diplomats, all of it was preparation for a full-scale invasion of human space. She compiled the evidence and sent it to Admiral and to the Galactic Council. Within hours, the information was public. Images of destroyed human settlements, records of abducted colonists, communications between military leaders discussing the best ways to eliminate the human infestation. The revelation changed galactic opinion overnight. Species that had criticized humanity's aggressive response suddenly went quiet. Some even began providing covert support, sharing intelligence and allowing human ships to use their space for resupply. Captain flew one of humanity's most advanced stealth vessels through space on a special mission. His ship was almost invisible to sensors, a shadow moving between stars. He carried orders directly from Admiral. Approaching he reported to his crew, prepare the infiltration package. His mission wasn't invasion. It was psychological warfare. His team would penetrate the planetary defense network and broadcast a message directly to every screen on the planet. They would show the people what their leaders had done and what humanity could do in return. The operation took 6 hours. His team bypassed security systems that were supposed to be impossible to crack. They wormed their way through networks designed by the best engineers. Human cyber warfare specialists were simply better. When everything was ready, gave the order, send the message. Every screen on the suddenly displayed the same image. The execution of human diplomats, broadcast months ago as a show of power. Then footage of destroyed military installations. Then a simple message in their language. Humanity could destroy this world from orbit within hours. We choose not to. This is not mercy. This is a lesson. Your leader's arrogance has cost you everything. Demand their surrender or watch your civilization die. The broadcast lasted 10 minutes before authorities managed to shut it down. But 10 minutes was enough. The entire planet had seen it. The people understood that their leaders had gambled with their lives and lost. Riots broke out in major cities. Citizens demanded explanations from their government. Military personnel began deserting. The hegemony's leadership realized they were losing control not just militarily, but politically. Back on Earth, worked in a secret weapons laboratory. He had been a civilian engineer before the war, designing peaceful technology. Then they killed his wife and daughter in a colony raid. Now he designed weapons. His latest creation was called the Morning Star. It used experimental quantum physics to create a field that would destabilize matter at the molecular level. One device could reduce an entire planet to dust. It was the most horrific weapon ever conceived by human science. Built it anyway, just in case. Admiral reviewed the weapon specifications and refused to authorize its deployment. This is too much. We're fighting to defend ourselves, not to become monsters. "They made us monsters," said bitterly. "They killed our people and laughed about it. And if we use this weapon, we become exactly what they thought we were, savages who destroy rather than build." Met his eyes. "I understand your pain, but we're going to win this war without becoming the villains." Nodded slowly and left the command center. But he didn't destroy the weapon. He kept it ready, locked away in a secure facility, just in case humanity needed it. The existence of the morning star leaked to intelligence through carefully controlled channels. When leaders learned that humanity had built a planet-killing weapon and chosen not to use it, the final remnants of their will to fight collapsed. They understood the message. Humanity was restraining itself. They were winning the war without using their most devastating weapons, which meant they could escalate at any moment if they continued fighting. Commander, the officer who had executed human diplomats, sat in a bunker deep underground. His career was over. His species was defeated. Everything he had believed about superiority had been proven false. Human forces were actively hunting him. Captain had made it her personal mission to capture the officer responsible for the executions. Knew he would be found eventually. There was nowhere to hide from an enemy with this much determination and resources. He recorded a final message to his government. "Surrender, accept all human terms. We cannot win this war, we never could. I thought humans were weak because they advocated for peace. I was wrong. They advocated for peace because they knew what war would cost. They tried to spare us this. We wouldn't listen." The message was transmitted to the High Command. Hours later, they sent an official communication to humanity. "Unconditional surrender, all terms accepted, please stop the killing." Admiral read the message and allowed herself a small smile. "Cease all offensive operations. Hold all captured territory. Inform the Galactic Council that the hegemony has surrendered." Around her, officers cheered. The war was over. Humanity had won. But didn't celebrate. She thought about the cost. 8,000 human soldiers killed, 23,000 wounded, countless deaths, military and civilian casualties of a war their leaders started. She thought about Minu and all the others executed on the horizon's edge. They had died trying to build peace. Instead, their deaths had triggered the most brutal war the galaxy had seen in centuries. "Victory," she said quietly to herself, "but at what cost?" Colonel approached her station. "The galaxy will remember this war for 1,000 years. Every species now knows what happens when humanity is pushed too far." "Good," said. "Let them remember. Let them understand. Humanity prefers peace. But when forced to fight, we fight to win, completely and permanently." The war was over. The consequences were just beginning. The war lasted 5 months and 12 days. When it ended, the galaxy was fundamentally changed. The balance of power had shifted in ways that would take centuries to fully understand. The Galactic Council convened to discuss the aftermath. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the Great Chamber, but all eyes were on the human delegation. Admiral stood among them, no longer just a military commander but the face of humanity's new position in galactic politics. The council chamber was quieter than usual. Gone were the dismissive attitudes and condescending tones that humans had endured for 15 years. Now there was respect, mixed with fear, mixed with uncertainty about what humanity would do next. The council leader, an ancient being from a species that had traveled the stars for 10,000 years, spoke first. "The hegemony has surrendered unconditionally. The council must now determine the terms of peace and the future status of territory." Stepped forward. "Humanity has already determined the terms. The government is dissolved as of today. Their military is disbanded. All military equipment is to be surrendered to human forces. Former territory will be divided as follows. 3 systems will be granted independence. 4 systems will be placed under joint human council oversight. The remaining systems will be demilitarized zones." And the people themselves, an alien representative asked. The people will be allowed to govern themselves at the local level, but major decisions will require human approval for 50 years. This is not a punishment for the species. This is a consequence for their leaders' decisions. Another representative objected. 50 years is an entire generation. This is too harsh. His expression remained neutral. The plan to exterminate humanity. We have evidence of genocide preparations. 50 years of oversight is merciful compared to extinction. She pulled up documents and images, broadcasting them throughout the chamber. Records of military planning. Communications discussing the best methods to eliminate human colonies. Orders to take no prisoners and show no mercy. The council fell silent as they reviewed the evidence. What they had thought was a simple border dispute revealed itself as a planned genocide that humanity had stopped through overwhelming military force. These are war crimes, the council leader said quietly. By galactic law, those responsible must face justice. They will, confirmed. We have a list of military and political leaders who planned and executed attacks on human civilians. They will be tried by an international tribunal. Those found guilty will face appropriate punishment. The discussion continued for hours. Some species objected to various terms. Others supported human demands. Eventually, a consensus emerged. Humanity's terms were harsh but not unreasonable given the circumstances. The hegemony had committed terrible crimes and lost a war they started. The consequences would be severe. On Earth, celebrations were muted. People were relieved the war was over, but there was little joy in how it ended. Thousands of humans had died. Hundreds of thousands had been killed. The galaxy was forever changed. Captain stood at a memorial service for fallen soldiers. She had survived the war without a scratch on her ship, but many of her friends and colleagues had not been so fortunate. She laid flowers at the memorial wall, reading names of people she had known. Lieutenant had died in the final weeks of the war when his ship suffered a catastrophic systems failure during a combat jump. Lieutenant had survived, but lost most of his original Marine unit in ground operations. The cost of victory was written in the names on the wall. They gave everything, said to Admiral who stood beside her. For what? So we could prove we're better at killing than the... No, replied. So that no one will ever attack humanity again. These soldiers died so that future generations of humans can live in peace. That's what they gave everything for. Wanted to believe that. She wanted to think the sacrifice was worth it, but looking at the names on the wall, she felt only emptiness. In the former territories, the transition began. Human administrators worked with local governments to establish new systems. It was difficult work. They resented their conquerors, even though most understood their leaders had brought this on themselves. Commander Bora led the intelligence operations in the occupied territories. Her job was to identify remaining military threats and ensure the peace terms were being followed. It was tedious, detailed work, nothing like the excitement of the war. We've identified the last of the military leaders on our wanted list, an analyst reported. Commander is hiding in a civilian settlement on the fourth planet of the system. Bora felt a cold satisfaction, was the one who had executed the diplomats, the one who had started everything by broadcasting their deaths across the galaxy. Send a team to arrest him. I want him alive for trial. The arrest happened without incident. Didn't resist. He seemed almost relieved that it was finally over. He was transported to Earth to await trial alongside other war criminals. The trials became a galactic media sensation. Species from across known space watched as evidence was presented and testimony was given. The leaders tried to justify their actions, claiming they were defending their territory and maintaining order. But the evidence was overwhelming. Records of planned genocide, orders to attack civilian targets, broadcasts of executions designed to terrorize. sat in the defendant's chair and watched footage of himself executing human diplomats. The person he had been 4 months ago seemed like a stranger. That person had believed were superior, that might made right, that humans were vermin to be exterminated. Now he understood the truth. Humans weren't vermin. They were apex predators who had been trying to be something better. That had forced them to show their teeth, and the result had been catastrophic. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" the judge asked. "Stood no defense. I am guilty of everything I'm accused of. I murdered defenseless prisoners. I helped plan attacks on civilians. I believed humanity was weak and could be crushed easily. I was wrong about everything." He paused, looking at the human observers in the courtroom. "I thought broadcasting the executions would make humans afraid. Instead, it united them. It turned them into something I didn't know existed, a species willing to burn down the galaxy to avenge their dead. I created the very enemy I feared." The trial concluded with guilty verdicts for most of the leadership. Some were sentenced to life imprisonment. Others received lesser sentences, was given life imprisonment with no possibility of parole. As he was led away, he passed close to Admiral. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for what I did, for what I caused. I know that means nothing, but I am sorry." Looked at him without expression. "Your apology doesn't bring back the people you murdered, but it's a start. Perhaps in prison you'll have time to think about what you learned." The galaxy moved forward. Human military forces remained in former territory, enforcing the peace. But gradually, as months passed, the occupation became less military and more administrative. Humans helped rebuild damaged infrastructure. They provided aid to civilian populations. They tried to be fair governors, even to a species that had wanted to exterminate them. Something unexpected happened. Young who had grown up during the war began to see humans differently, not as conquerors but as the species that had defeated their oppressors. The old government had been corrupt and militaristic. Now, with human oversight, there were opportunities for reform and growth. Some even applied to study at human universities. Doctor, who had spent the war studying alien species to find weaknesses, now taught xenobiology to students from across the galaxy, including several. "Why do you help us?" a young student asked her, "after what we did to your people?" Considered the question carefully. "Because holding grudges forever helps no one. Your leaders made terrible decisions. Your military committed war crimes. But you're not responsible for what happened before you were old enough to understand it. Humanity fought to survive, not to create eternal enemies." The student seemed surprised by this answer. Like many of his generation, he had expected humans to be cruel conquerors. Instead, they were strict but fair administrators who genuinely seemed to want the people to succeed. The Galactic Council adapted to the new reality. Humanity was no longer the young, inexperienced species to be dismissed. They were a major power, one of the strongest military forces in known space. Other species approached them with defensive alliance proposals. Some wanted human protection. Others wanted to ensure they would never face human military forces themselves. Captain, the stealth operations specialist, found himself training alien military officers in modern warfare techniques. It was strange teaching the same tactics he had used against the two species who might someday be enemies. But Admiral had been clear. Humanity's goal was preventing future wars, not preparing for them. "If everyone understands how we fight," had explained, "they'll understand why attacking us is a terrible idea. Deterrence through knowledge." 3 years after the war ended, Ambassador stood before the Galactic Council once more. She had been promoted after her strong stance during the war. Now she spoke not about conflict, but about cooperation. "Humanity learned something important during the war. We're good at fighting, too good. We evolved to be persistence predators, and that psychology serves us well in combat. But we don't want to be known as the galaxy's warriors. We want to be known as the galaxy's builders." She pulled up images of reconstruction projects in former space, new cities being built, infrastructure being modernized, schools and hospitals constructed with human aid. We defeated thee in 5 months. We've spent 3 years helping them rebuild. That's the ratio we want to maintain. For every month of war, we commit years to peace. Because that's who humans really are. We fight when we must, but we prefer to create. The council listened with genuine interest. This was a different message than the one they had heard during the war. Then, humanity had been about overwhelming force and inevitable victory. Now, they spoke about cooperation and growth. But everyone remembered what humans were capable of. When spoke about preferring peace, the other species believed her. Not because humans were weak or afraid, but because they had proven they could win any war they chose to fight. Their preference for peace came from a position of absolute strength. A memorial was built on Earth to honor those killed during the war. Not just military personnel, but the diplomats from the horizon's edge who had died trying to build understanding between species. Their names were carved in stone, Minu, and all the others. Admiral attended the dedication ceremony. She was old now, tired from years of military service, but she stood straight as she addressed the crowd. These people died doing what they believed in. They believed that different species could understand each other. That conflict wasn't inevitable. That peace was possible. She paused, looking at the names carved in stone. They were right. Peace is possible, but sometimes, paradoxically, you have to fight to achieve it. She gestured to the memorial. When they executed these diplomats, they thought they were demonstrating strength. Instead, they demonstrated that humanity's patience isn't weakness. It's a choice. When we choose to stop being patient, when we choose to fight, we fight with every tool and tactic we've developed over millions of years of evolution. The crowd was silent, listening. The galaxy learned a lesson during the war. Humanity is the most deadly species alive. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us constantly. We became apex predators through persistence and adaptability. We've carried those traits into space. His voice softened. But we choose not to be predators. We choose to be peaceful, not because we're weak, but because we're strong enough to make that choice. She turned to face the memorial one last time. These people tried to build bridges. They died for that effort. But their deaths weren't in vain. Because now every species in the galaxy understands what happens when you attack humanity. The choice is clear. Live in peace with us or face extinction. Most species are choosing peace. The ceremony ended. People placed flowers at the memorial. Among them was a young who had traveled across the galaxy to pay respects to the people his species had murdered. He stood before the names and whispered an apology, not because anyone asked him to, but because he felt he should. His generation would live in a galaxy shaped by this war, a galaxy where peace was enforced by the knowledge of what humanity could do when pushed too far. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the gentle, understanding peace that Minu and had worked toward, but it was peace nonetheless. And sometimes, in an imperfect universe, that was enough. Humanity remained the most deadly species in the galaxy, but they chose, every single day, to be peaceful instead. That choice, backed by undeniable military power, created a stability that benefited everyone. The war was over. The killing had stopped. Life continued, forever changed by 5 months of violence and 3 years of reconstruction. And in the memorial on Earth, names carved in stone reminded future generations why humanity fought wars to end them, not to glorify them. The message was clear. Congratulations, you declared war on the most deadly species alive. Learn from the mistake. Don't do it again.